If we're talking about 600cc sports bikes, we should really mention Suzuki's GSXR 600. And whilst it might be one of the best looking race replicas you can buy, it's certainly not one of the most popular. It doesn't sell anywhere near as well as the CBR, Kawasaki's ZX6 and of course Yamaha's R6. And I think the problem with it is it's just too focused, it's a bit too radical. It's certainly the least comfortable of the 600s. There's not a lot of room on this seat, so even short riders will get backache after, well, perhaps a couple of hours in the saddle. And the engine is a bit too revvy really for using everyday kind of thing. You've got to have it spinning at something like 7.5, 8,000 revs plus to find any decent usable power. It means it's great on a racetrack, straight lines where you can thrash it and chuck it out of corners, superb, but around town, not really ideal, which is probably why it hasn't quite got the sales of the rest.
Now, all the Japanese bikes that we featured up until now, they've all been 4 cylinders. But in 1997, Honda, a bit concerned that way Ducati were beating the RC45 on the track, thought they needed a V-twin as well. So they came up with this, the VTR 1000 Firestorm. V-twin, 90-degree V-twin at that, just like a Ducati, but a much sort of simpler bike. In other words, pretty standard other than that, nothing exceptional to it. It had side-mounted radiators, was something new that we'd seen. Also had a very small petrol tank, and in fact this bike has become renowned for its small range. You know, you can be lucky to get 110 miles out of a tank full, which can be a bit of a bind. In fact, that's probably on the generous side. 90 miles is something more like it. But nevertheless, it's a light and nimble bike, very popular, easy to ride, very flexible, and of course it's got that Honda reliability. Now, while Honda had the Firestorm, Suzuki weren't going to be outdone in this V-twin battle, so they brought out this, the TL1000S, again in 1997. Big 90-degree V-twin, but this fuel-injected, not carbs like the Firestorm. Nice looking bike. You've got this twin-tube frame here, very much like a Triumph 595, but this had a terrible reputation in the early days in some sectors of the media, the bike press, for getting into a tank slapper. This was because it was light on the front end and the bars would start to wave, and so it was reputed people were killed. But whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's one of those things that's never really bottomed out. And talking about bottoming out, one of the problems was supposed to be the rather novel rear suspension. It used a rotary damper, and the idea was it didn't give quite enough compliance, and so you used to be able to lift up the front end far too easy. There have been some mods done to them. Ron Williams of Maxton Engineering did a mod, and in fact we went up there to see him with a TL1000S. But it was still a nice bike to ride, a lot of feel, a lot of character to it. But to address some of these concerns, Suzuki then came out the next year with the TL1000R. And even though they didn't admit to any mistakes, they completely changed the frame and completely changed the rear suspension. It also had a lot more weight in having this big fairing, so there was more weight over the front wheel. But again, with this one, same as Honda, they had aspirations to go World Superbike racing with this, but they didn't really make it. Unlike Honda, of course, with the SP1, and they did make it.
Now, during the 1990s, 3 different manufacturers have held the title of world's fastest production bike. At the start of the 90s, Kawasaki owned the title with their ZZR 1100. Then Honda came along with the CBR 1100XX, the Super Blackbird, and that was the fastest production bike. Then in 1999, the title was taken by Suzuki because they launched this, the GSX 1300R Hayabusa. Strange name and a very strange looking bike, as far as some people are concerned. Certainly a very different looking bike. I think it's catching on a little bit now. People are starting to accept it, but it was slagged off terribly when it came out. People said, oh my God, that shouldn't look like that, sports bike shouldn't look like that. It is incredibly fast. 190 something miles an hour is the claimed top speed. Nobody seems to be exactly sure what the top speed is. There are rumours of Hayabusas being clocked at 200 miles an hour and even 200 miles an hour plus. All I can say is when I attended the world launch to the Catalunya race circuit in Barcelona, I managed to get it up to 175 miles an hour, and that was quite fast enough. Things go past your face very, very fast at 170 miles an hour. It actually won an award about 18 months ago from the motorcycle press, and it was called Sports Tourer of the Year. Now, is it a sports tourer? Is it a sports bike? What exactly is it? I'm not really sure what category it fits into. It's certainly got the performance to keep up with any sports bike, although it hasn't got the agility and the nimbleness of like your GSXRs and your R1s and R6s and even your Fireblades. But it's certainly a very, very fast bike, and at the moment, as we speak, nothing can beat it on speed.
And I'd have to agree with that, because Paul and I have often discussed this top speed thing, and by golly, 190 mile an hour, isn't that plenty fast enough for anyone? But when Kawasaki brought out this, the ZX12R, the rumours were of a 200 mile an hour motorbike. Now, it didn't do it, as you probably know. It didn't reach that magic 200 miles an hour. I tested it, thought it was an absolutely fantastic bike, but I didn't do 200 miles an hour either, needless to say, because it was on UK roads. But nevertheless, it's a fast bike, and now all bikes in the European Union, they're all regulated to 180. So we've probably seen the end of the speed wars. And all I'd say to you, I think, that if 180 mile an hour isn't fast enough for you, you may as well buy an aeroplane. Okay, Paul, we all set?
We are, but we haven't even mentioned the GSXR 750.
That's true. But then again, there's other Suzukis. We haven't mentioned Bandits either, have we?
The bargain bike of the 90s. We never mentioned them, did we? Yamaha's Phaser, we didn't mention that.
Yeah, another cracking bike.
Yeah.
Some of BMW's bikes, the R1100 RS.
That's true. The VMAXs.